and welcome. My name is Melissa Rabronia. I am a trauma-sensitive healing practitioner, educator, and host at healyourheart.love. And today's guest is Emily Agnew. Emily Agnew offers one-on-one intensive programs for highly sensitive people, helping them transform anxiety and shame through a better inner relationship, a stronger spiritual connection, and effective self-regulation skills. She also supports the HSP community through her twice-monthly blog posts for the Sustainably Sensitive newsletter, in which she covers every aspect of building a sustainable, sensitive life. Emily played the oboe professionally for 35 years, including 5 years with the Honolulu Symphony. She loved it, but also struggled constantly with anxiety. This struggle led her to study the modalities she now shares with clients, including focusing, inner bonding, and self-regulating breath practices. Visit sustainablysensitive.com for in-depth information. Welcome, Emily.
Thanks for having me, Melissa.
I'm happy to have you. So how I know you is you first came recommended through somebody that I was focusing with. And because I asked her, I believe, how did you find inner relationship focusing? And she is a highly sensitive person, and she happens to be a reflector in human design, which is something that I give readings, which also adds to the sensitivity. So she said that she was searching online, I guess, for sensitivity and came across you. And I remember looking at your website, and then I enrolled in 2-year training to become a focusing teacher and facilitator. And I was excited to see you part of the faculty, and I selected you as a mentor. So you're my mentor. Yeah.
Yeah. So we have that stretching in front of us, which is really exciting. Yeah.
Yes. And then I saw your site, and there's all this information on highly sensitive people trait. I did the test and discovered that indeed I too am a highly sensitive person.
So that's when you first discovered. Okay.
Yeah. So it's new to me, and that's why I wanted to do this interview. So thank you. Thank you, Emily. I'm really excited to learn more. So let's start by asking you, where do you fit in the HSP world?
Well, first of all, I fit as an HSP. I'm very much a highly sensitive person. I'm kind of at the upper end of sensitivity. I didn't know that my whole life. So I had a whole previous career as a professional oboist and struggled a lot with anxiety and performance nerves. I loved it. And most HSPs are creative, and I loved it, but there were aspects of it that were really hard. But so all the things the modalities that I teach and all the stuff I share with clients is stuff I learned completely for myself at first. But more recently now, I do work with clients, and all of my work is based on Elaine Aron's books. If you've been in the HSP world at all, you know her name because she literally wrote the books about it. She was the person who named the trait in 1996. And I always feel like I want to, give her a shout out, not that she needs it, but just because her work has been so life-changing for so many people. She's just been a tireless exponent of the trait. And her works are dense, I would say. And when I read them, it was almost more than I could take in. And so that's one of my roles in the HSP world is I love to write, and I write like 2 articles a month, and I just take one really specific aspect of the trait, like a typical, like say, deep processing, or something about what it's like being an HSP, like our tendency to be almost overly conscientious at times and burn ourselves out. And I'll write about just that one thing using stories and metaphors and stuff. And the feedback I've gotten from people is that it's just helpful. They're like, oh, okay, I'd heard that, but I didn't quite get it that way till now. So that's one of my roles, is just to kind of clarify and explain things in a way that's helpful for people, and then also to work with people in a way that gives them both the experience of a new kind of inner relationship and also self-regulation tools, because that's a big issue for a lot of HSPs, and a better connection to their inner knowing, which some people would call their spiritual intuition. You don't have to think of yourself as spiritual to do it, but yeah. So I become a practitioner. I help people in this intense one-on-one way, but then I have an audience that I write for, which I find very rewarding.
I love your website. I love your newsletters. So thank you for the work that you do. For those who don't know and are brand new, what is HSP?
What is it? Well, HSP stands for highly sensitive person. And the technical name for the trait is sensory processing sensitivity, but it's more commonly known as high sensitivity. And it's an actual genetic trait they've discovered.
Oh, interesting.
So you do inherit it. And
my mother.
Your mother, right? Yes. And maybe we'll talk more in a minute about its prevalence in the population, because that's a little bit subtler point. But a significant number of the population, at least a fifth, are quite highly sensitive, and by some measures it's more. And what it means is that there's 4 characteristics that all HSPs share. I mean, we live all over the world, all sexes. We're, all shapes and sizes, right? So, and all kinds of professions and everything, but we all share a trait called deep processing, which is that if you put us in an MRI, like if I were to put you in an MRI machine and someone who's not highly sensitive and show you the same pictures, more areas of your brain light up than the person who's not highly sensitive. You literally process at a deeper level. The way Elaine puts it is, it's as if you had a machine that sorted oranges, and someone who's not highly sensitive would sort the oranges into 3 sizes. Your brain sorts them into 10. That takes a lot of energy. So we can get tired out or over aroused more easily. And over arousal is actually the second. So there's deep processing. Over arousal is there's a tendency to your nervous system gets a little overwhelmed. So managing that is a huge thing for HSPs, and also understanding that there's nothing wrong with you, that happens. Often that's one of the things HSPs notice first when they're young, is that they seem to respond differently to certain situations than others. So, and then the third thing is emotional intensity or empathy. It's an E. The acronym is DOES, so depth of processing, over arousal, emotional intensity, and empathy, which that's related to the deep processing. We just feel more deeply than people who are not highly sensitive. We have we tend to have vivid dreams. So we need to also to be able to manage our intense emotions. And then the final trait that all HSPs share is sensory sensitivity, which you may, I don't know if you, like for me, since I was little, tags bothered me, scratching my skin or any kind of scratchy fabric, very bright lights.
Oh, often, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I have the sensitivity to light. Yes.
Yes. Often in a room, if there's some like buzzy noise, it'll be an HSP in the room, it'll be the first. And everyone else may say, oh, yeah, it's nice having that gone, but they wouldn't have necessarily.
Yeah, I like silence. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes. So there's a number of ways. And also sensitivity to substances like caffeine and stuff. So those are just some of the ways that HSPs are different from non-HSPs.
Interesting. And how does one find out if they are a HSP?
If they're HSP, you can go to Elaine Aaron's site, which is just hsperson.com, and take her test. She has 3 tests there, the high sensitivity test. There's also a high sensation seeking test, which you sometimes.
I did that one and I'm not.
You're not. I'm not either.
Not. Yeah.
So you can take that test, and that's the original test. There's 27 items on it. And I've actually written an article about this that you can just find it on my blog. It's just why you should take the HSP test again.
I can include it in the description of the video to just make it easy. Here's the quiz, here's the article. So I'll do that.
Good, perfect. Yeah. Because first time you take it really quick and you go, yes, no, yes, no. And as Elaine explains, you may not say yes to all 27 items, but if you say a very strong yes to 14, then you're probably highly sensitive. But the test is really useful as just a learning tool. You go through it and just ask yourself, and that's what I talk about in the article, is just taking time with each question, going, does this remind me of anything? Like, does this bring up memories from the past? How do I feel about this? Because often there can be shame about some aspects if you felt like you were different, say, from other kids.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And there's a newer test that you can go on sensitivityresearch.com and take. And that's the Daisy Tulip Orchid test, where they've built on and refined Elaine's research because she said that 15 to 20% of the population was highly sensitive and kind of the rest not. But
Got it.
they did a deeper, more complex analysis of all the same studies and some new studies, and found that actually about 30% of people are quite highly sensitive. And then the middle 40% are somewhat, and the final 30% not very sensitive. We're all
Okay.
sensitive in a way, but there are people in the world who will answer no to every single question on the HSP quiz.
Right.
And there are people who will answer yes to every single one, and there's a difference. So the sensitivity research scale is just more, it's subtler. It'll give you
Got it.
a
Okay.
number on a 1 to 7 scale.
Got it. So that's the test that I did. And as you can see, my score is 5.8, and I am in the high category. I always had a sense that I was sensitive, but I also had a sense that I am strong. And then something in me is like, well, I can't be, if I'm this strong, or if I feel this strength, I can't also be sensitive. So I thought there was something in me that had this maybe judgment that if you're sensitive, you can't be strong, you're weak, right? And also I never really, even though I related to terms like empath, I don't know why, I just don't like that term. So by the time I got to your website, I was ready to accept that I'm possibly highly sensitive, another label, with more acceptance and curiosity. Now I'm starting to see that it is actually, it could be a gift, because if I think of some of my favorite people, even people in my life now, they are also highly sensitive. And when I look back at some just really special people in my life, the connection that we had is that high sensitivity, which to me just intuitively means there is a depth of connection and really just being present and still. So now I'm starting to see it as a strength. So I'm ready to come out as highly sensitive because I think it takes courage.
Well,
Yeah.
you've mentioned some really key points. I mean, the label itself it's just unfortunate. And I think we all know that, because the word sensitive has these certain, it's what Eugene Gendlin would call a public word. It's a word that has a lot of layers of meaning in our culture. And even for women, even to be sensitive, it quickly moves over into too oversensitive.
It feels like we're saying, oh, I'm not thick-skinned, but it doesn't. I know that I'm also strong. That's why it's confusing. Yeah.
That's right. It just means that your nervous system is built this certain way. And ironically, my most recent blog post was about, I don't like labeling myself HSP. It was about someone who wrote me about that once. And it's true that, because if the label comes with judgment, then that's not fun. But the thing is, we're not born with an owner's manual. And at least now the information's out there. But when I was born, the trait hadn't been named. And so I was just in this soup of intense feelings and deep processing, and I didn't have any idea how to regulate myself. So the good news about the label is that it does come with an owner's manual, you know, ways of taking care of yourself. One of the things I really am grateful to Elaine Aron for is that she has sort of looked back historically and seen how in the past, well, and maybe still now, I don't know, but especially in the past, highly sensitive people often had really important roles. Like they were the shamans, the wise men, the advisors, the priestly advisors to the warrior class, who are more the go out and do it. Another key trait HSPs share is what we call the pause to check stance, which is that we tend to want to stand back and watch a bit first before we dive in. Some people really don't. They're like, just do it. Like I remember an old boyfriend who's like, with his stereo, he's like, just start doing stuff. I'm like, no, I need to read the directions.
Right.
Some people learn by doing. HSPs tend to want to watch and observe first before going in. And just knowing those things about yourself can really make life a lot easier, you know, to know how to handle it. But I'm glad it's so cool that you're on that journey now.
Thank you. I've definitely been called intense, and it took me a few people. I'm like, am I intense? So tell me how you discovered that you are HSP.
Well, I think I kind of discovered it without knowing that's what it was when I was young, like when my brothers would call me the princess and the pea. You know, the princess could feel the pea through 20 mattresses, because they apparently how I responded was not the way other people respond to being like, you know, elbowed or whatever. But in terms of actually finding out the label, it was in 2000. And I was actually going through a very difficult divorce and somehow happened to be reading, I think it was a Psychology Today. And I've even gone back and tried to find the article. I couldn't find it, but it was a sidebar that listed, do you this, like, do you need 8 hours of sleep? Do you hate really bright lights and loud noises? Do you just all these questions? And I was check. And I said, what is this? This is me. And I read, it was an article by Elaine Aron about high sensitivity.
Ah,
And that's when I started learning about it. Yeah.
ah,
I
yeah,
didn't go into depth until much later. And actually, that's a pattern that I've seen where more and more people now, because of the amazing work that people like Elaine have done, know about high sensitivity, and they may even know that they're highly sensitive, but they know surprisingly little about it,
right.
about how to manage it. So that's why I have a career with it, because it really is a need to go deep.
Yeah.
Where people say, oh, so that's that thing that happens. Oh, when I do that, that's my deep processing. I'm like, yes.
Mhm.
And there's that eureka moment.
Right. What are the three different types when you take the quiz?
Orchids, which I think that's the most sensitive. I think they chose that because orchids need the most specialized care. And then there's tulips, which are kind of in the middle, and then daisies.
And
Which
daisies,
my only objection to that list is that most people think of orchids as more special than daisies, and nobody is more special. At least that would be my only
right.
about those flowers. And it's not about special or not, it's just about the care.
Right. Makes sense. Yeah. So what is the care once somebody finds out that they are highly sensitive? Tell us a little bit about what you would like them to know.
Well, if someone has grown up in a household where their sensitivity was fully accepted and embraced, even if people didn't know what it was, so they don't have shame around it, then they won't be coming to me. Right. But many people grow up in a situation where maybe their parents feel like they're worried that they're too fragile or weak because they cry easily, especially boys cry. We get moved by music. Like my father was highly sensitive. He used to cry. He'd put on Beethoven's Seventh and go in the living room and at certain points and just weep with the beauty of the music. But that's not socially acceptable for boys generally in our culture.
Right.
So if you got shamed, and it happens for girls too, not just boys, then you may have you had the intense emotions that maybe you were being shamed for in the first place, like being too sensitive, plus you've got that extra layer. So an inner relationship, and the focusing that you and I are trained in is really wonderful for that, is the first thing I encourage people to seek, is just, it's a relationship with themselves that's kind, that offers space, that welcomes all the guests that show up, as Rumi says, even those who throw around the furniture. So that's one thing. And then another thing is practices for self-regulation. Like if I go to New York City and I ride the subway around and walk around all day, I'm going to be buzzing by the end of the day. And I need to have breath practices, things that I can do, and to have daily practices, like I meditate and stuff to keep my nervous system happy. I teach those to everyone I can get my hands on. Right. So, and then the third thing is a flexible, sturdy personal infrastructure, like just to know what you need in the way of sleep. HSPs do not do well short on sleep. We need sleep, and we also need downtime. That is time when we need transition time between things, not to push all the time. And we need time to just be. Like maybe we rest, maybe we read, maybe we go for a walk, but just to be. More than people who are less sensitive. You were saying how you love being with HSPs because, we can be very deep and still. But if you saw me on a bad, overstimulated, exhausted day, you'd be like, ah. It's like the poem my grandmother used to tell us. There was a little girl who had a little curl right in the middle of her forehead. And when she was good, she was very, very good. And when she was bad, she was horrid.
Well, thank you for saying that. That's true for all of us. I guess I meant like an HSP on a good day, right?
On a good day. Well, in a well cared for HSP.
Well cared, yes.
That's where the orchid thing does come in. And the metaphor I use on my site, like my logo is a dahlia, because we grow dahlias, my partner and I, and they really need a lot of special care. But if you give them that care, they are astounding. They will bloom from early July till the first frost in October, and each plant will produce like hundreds of blooms. They're extraordinary. And that's the same way. If you give yourself the right self-care, HSPs can just be extraordinarily creative, productive, happy. We just really need to know what to do for ourselves. Yeah.
Beautiful. That's good to know. And yeah, I can totally relate to all those things. I I was known to, be on a date and cry at restaurants, but just because of something I'm sharing. And then I would see my date would be mortified because they're worried that people are going to think that they made me cry, but that's not. Yeah. So I was like, no, it's okay. I do this all the time. Like I would just see something and it would be like random things, like some people celebrating a birthday party and then me remembering something or me helping somebody on the street. And right after the interaction, like I would just cry. So
Yeah.
yeah.
That's your emotional intensity and also depth of processing. It's a wonderful aspect of being highly sensitive is that you really feel things keenly.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for normalizing that. And definitely crowds. Like I remember I arrived on Capri Island, and because it's an island, you can take this thing that takes you up on the top. And I visualized it just being peaceful with no people, but instead it was the opposite. It was like a subway going up, and then it was like it looked like Rodeo Drive when you arrive, all these people. And I literally had a moment where I was like flustered, overwhelmed, and I had to like walk away where there was no people. And my husband was like, I told you, I showed you footage, like this is what it was. Thank you for normalizing that. I'm not crazy.
You're not crazy. And actually what you're describing brings up another, because you were asking about traits that we have as HSPs, and a term that you'll hear in the high sensitivity world is variable susceptibility, which is kind of a bit of a mouthful, but it just means that we are susceptible to our environment to a greater degree than people who are not as sensitive. That applies big picture to your childhood. So if you had a rough childhood, it's going to affect you more than if you were not a highly sensitive kid. On the other hand, they did studies with teenagers where they did therapeutic interventions with teenagers who were showing depressive symptoms. And amazingly, the ones who were highly sensitive benefited greatly from the intervention. Those who were not did not benefit. Isn't that crazy? So we benefit more from positive interventions. So that brings us back to the inner relationship, because that's the ultimate environment, is your own inner world. Like if I'm being hard on myself or critical of myself all the time, I can't get away from that. I'm never going to get a break from that. So that's why the inner relationship, because if we have that inner shaming structure and we get in a situation where we feel ashamed or flustered or whatever, we can kind of spiral down. Like that's what would happen to me in auditions and stuff. But just so you know, like on the more local level, variable susceptibility affects us in like a public situation. Like we're very affected by crowds like that or other people's energy. You can, if someone else is really angry, you can feel it coming almost like a wave. So just to know that you're not crazy.
Thank you. Yeah. You already shared why you decided to work with highly sensitive people, because there is a need. Do you ever have a client that is not? And what is that like for you?
No, I'm going to flip your question around, because actually I just started working with the clients who were drawn to me. I didn't actually initially put out a shingle, just people started coming to me. And after a certain point, I realized, I guess I have a business here and I should like do something about it. And one of the first things people do is say, well, who do you work with? And I realized the thing that my clients all had in common was they're all highly sensitive. So I didn't initially set out to work with highly sensitive people. I just realized that's what I was doing and that I actually could really serve that way. So then I just made it more, put that in my business name, Sustainably Sensitive, because that is who I work with. I'm not sure that I'd be the best person for someone who's not highly sensitive. I could conceivably, but actually, I have on my shelf right over there, one of my favorite books of Elaine's. It's more for practitioners, but it's called Psychotherapy and the Highly Sensitive Person. It's about highly sensitive clients, because they are the majority of clients in therapy.
Interesting. Okay.
Well over half. Yeah. Because of the tough childhood variable susceptibility thing, a distinct majority of
makes sense.
Therapy clients are highly sensitive. And it's kind of surprising, actually. More therapists now know about high sensitivity, but still quite a few out there don't. And so I've had people come to me who've worked with really, really good therapists who they liked a lot, but they said, oh my gosh, this is this total missing piece to understand, to get the owner's manual, basically.
Absolutely. Yeah, that makes sense. And I was thinking that highly sensitive people would make good healing practitioner and therapist.
Yes. Well, it's interesting. Elaine talks about that. And she says she wishes that more HSPs would be therapists. Sometimes people don't do it because they find it so intense You have to be
Right.
careful. For whatever reason, that hasn't been an issue for me, like taking on other people's emotions. But I also am very careful. Like I don't keep the kind of schedule that I've known some therapists to keep, where they start
Right.
at 9 and go till 7 and see someone every hour. I do
Yeah.
hour sessions and I take half an hour in between,
Yeah,
you
that
know,
makes sense.
just,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Is there anything else that you'd like us to know about HSP or you or your work that hasn't been shared yet?
You know, what comes to me to say about being an HSP is that there's, if you're listening to this and you're suffering, you're highly sensitive and you're thinking, I wish I weren't, I just wish this would all go away. It gets better. It really does. And it can be pretty rough. Like if you're dysregulated and don't have the internal relationship skills or self-regulating skills, and if you're gone through a tough divorce, because like my divorce was chaotic and very, very challenging. It really took it out of me. You can really plunge, experience a lot of anxiety and depression, but there's absolutely a way out. And the sweet part of having been in a really tough place, which too many HSPs have been, unfortunately, is that when you find that peace, you never take it for granted. It's just this, you wake up in the morning and realize, oh, like that's more where I am now. And I'm just literally every day I wake up feeling grateful. And that's one of the things that fuels the work that I do, because I know what it's like to wake up thinking, oh my gosh, how am I going to get through this day? I'm so anxious. I'm so tired. Shame can come up initially for people learning about the trait, but it brings relief in the end to know how to care for yourself better.
Absolutely. And I think that's why I wanted to do this video, so that other people out there can find out if they're not and come out as highly sensitive, so to speak. Where can people find you?
They can find me at my website, which is www.sustainablysensitive.com. And I think there might be 180 articles that I've written now, substantial articles. So there's a lot of material there on a lot of topics to do. One of these days, I want to write a book.
Yeah, I was thinking that. Yeah.
That's in my mind. And then also I recommend that I do have this newsletter. I write 2 articles a month, and you can sign up for that too. I don't bombard people. I just, those are the only emails I send out, and people seem to really value those. So that's another, just a totally free resource. Yeah.
Thank you. It's lovely to have you. And yeah,
Thank you.
hopefully we'll have you back again for more.
Thank you. I really appreciate being able to spend this time with you.
My pleasure.
I know how special you are.